As Prime Minister Trudeau walked to address a massive gathering on festivities linked to Khalsa Day in Toronto, the cheers clearly audible were Khalistan zindabad slogans. Slogans that grew louder as Justin Trudeau neared the dais.
Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh.
Now is absolutely clear that it does not endorse any anti-India activities and certainly not these slogans. But we still just brought this to give you a sense of how brazenly this happened right before the Canadian Prime Minister. These are, ladies and gentlemen, Pro-Khalistanis, a group designated by India, openly shouting anti-India separatist slogans before the Canadian Prime Minister, under whom India-Canada relations have nosedived after Justin Trudeau's unsubstantiated claims for Indian hand in the killing of Khalistani terrorist Nijjar, a claim strongly refuted by India, but reiterated by Canadian Prime Minister several times. Also present along with the Prime Minister were NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow. A similar instance also occurred when the leader of the official opposition of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, walked up to the stage to begin his address. The people gathered at the event. India's Ministry of External Affairs has summoned the Canadian Deputy High Commissioner, conveying deep concern and strong protest at such disturbing actions being allowed to continue unchecked at the event, to quote the Ministry of External Affairs. India has claimed this once again illustrates the political space that has been given to Canada, that has been given in Canada, to separatism, extremism and violence. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's brazen patronage of violent Khalistani elements in Canada is in keeping with the Canadian governments in the past, protecting individuals indulging in anti-India activities. What has made it worse is Trudeau's competitive wooing of Khalistanis after a rival claimant for Khalistani votes emerged, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of New Democratic Party, since 2017, who was also present on the stage. If you want to understand one of the reasons of the support that Trudeau has openly shown for pro-Khalistanis, you have to understand Jagmeet Singh's role in forming the Canadian Trudeau government in 2021. Justin Trudeau had secured 150 seats but fell short of 170 for majority government. Jagmeet Singh, as a leader of the New Democratic Party, secured 25 seats, and Justin Trudeau entered into an agreement with Jagmeet Singh, with the Trudeau's Liberals pledging support to various stands of NDP. Now, Jagmeet Singh has openly expressed support for separatist movement, also called Khalistani movement, and obviously Trudeau has never condemned these acts in the name of freedom of speech. Khalistani movement member played a role in the assassination of Indira Gandhi's, in fact, India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and eventually has found supporters among the large and scattered Sikh diaspora, predominantly in Canada, a country that is home to the largest Sikh population outside Punjab. Khalistan movement seeks a separate home country for Sikhs, distinct from India, is officially a terrorist group, a movement that later not only took shelter in Canada but allegedly has seen a revival during Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister. Sikhs account to almost 2% of the population. There are almost 770,000 Sikhs in Canada, and India is the largest source of foreign students in Canada as well. In fact, Indian students are around 40% of study permit holders in the country, and therefore remember all of this constitutes a key vote bank as well. But as I said earlier, Trudeau's policy isn't in isolation or compulsion. It's possibly just repeat mode, like father, like son, if we may. It was during Pierre Trudeau's time that Talvinder Singh Parmar fled to Canada after killing 2 police personnel in Punjab in 1981. Parmar, a member of Khalistani outfit Babbar Khalsa, called for attacks on Indian missions abroad and communal killings, according to media reports. India requested that Parmar be extradited, but the government headed by Pierre Trudeau turned down that request. India's intelligence agencies sent an urgent message to the Canadian authorities on June 1st, 1985, seeking security measures against a possible airplane attack by Khalistani terrorists. This again, according to the research we've been able to do through several media reports. On June 23rd, 1985, a bomb in 2 suitcases was set off on Air India Flight 182, flying from Toronto to UK's London, killing all the 329 passengers on board, including Canadians as well as Indians. In fact, there's only one person who was convicted in this particular case, and he was also let out of the jail under Justin Trudeau's term. We'll try and understand the different dynamics involved vis-a-vis India and Canada, but also the various aspects. I'm being joined right now by Terry Milewski, who is the author for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project. Ashok Sajjanhar, who's a former ambassador. Surinder Singh Lali, the national spokesperson for Global Punjabi Association from Delhi. And Dean Baxendale, publisher and columnist, CEO for Optimum Publishing International. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. We just hope to have deep and greater understanding of this entirely complex issue before us. But first to you, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. This is not the first time that we have witnessed what we have in Canada. This is not the first time that India has given a strong retort as well. But do you see something that may be unusual, maybe a trend that may defy diplomatic relations as seen earlier?
Yes, thank you very much, Sneha. And you're very right. This is not the first time that India has brought up this issue. It has been, in recent months, if not even in recent years, this has really come up in a very big way. You would recall that on the 18th of September last year, just after returning from the G20 Summit in Delhi, Justin Trudeau had stood up in the Canadian Parliament and accused India of being behind the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the terrorist who is, supporter of the Khalistani movement. And this, he said, there was credible evidence. We have asked after that if there is any credible allegations, my apologies. He said there were credible allegations, and that, of course, as was pointed out at that time, it's a contradiction in terms, either these are allegations or, they are not credible at all. So we have been asking for evidence. We have said if there is anything significant, any relevant facts that you have to offer, please share them with us. Till date, it's going to be more than 10 months since Hardeep Singh Nijjar was killed in Canada, but we have got nothing. And what we have seen is that Justin Trudeau and his party, they have been hobnobbing, they have been pandering to the Khalistani terrorists because of their own political compulsions. You have laid it out very clearly. Justin Trudeau won only 157 seats. His Liberal Party won only 157 seats. He needs about 13, 14 more to come to power and to stay in power. And that is why he has gone on to partner with Jagmeet Singh of the NDP, and he's got support from there. So he's kowtowing to whatever are the demands of the Sikh militants, of the Sikh terrorists, and irrespective of the fact that, we've had that tableau of Mrs. Indira Gandhi being assassinated shown on that tableau. There have been threats against Indian leaders. There have been threats against Indian diplomats, against Indian High Commissioner in Canada. But the Canadian authorities have turned a blind eye. And this latest is, evidence what we see, that Khalistan zindabad, that means an attack on the integrity, territorial integrity and sovereignty of India, a dismemberment of a friendly country. And Justin Trudeau, as the head of the government, is standing there and smiling and applauding. So I think this is very disturbing, and it is, one more move to push the India-Canadian relations to an even lower level. We had thought that we had reached abysmal depths already, but if attitude and actions of this nature continue, then of course there is little hope for improvement of bilateral relations in the very near future. Sneha.
Right. Of course, India has given a very strong retort yet again, but allow me to just go across to other panelists as well for their introductory remarks. Terry, if I could come across to you at this point. With the depth, first-hand understanding that you have of the situation for decades in Canada, would you say that it is correct or wrong to say that there's been a resurgence of what is being seen as a pro-Khalistani movement in Canada under Justin Trudeau?
I would say, in summary, and thank you for the invitation, by the way, I would say that the Khalistani movement in Canada has not really grown in strength. It appears stronger because of the additional space that it has been given by not just the Liberal government, but all parties in the Canadian system. I won't go on about that. I'll just tell you that the Conservative opposition leader, who the polls say may very well be the next Prime Minister of Canada, was also at this event in Toronto, where chants of Khalistani zindabad were raised, as well as you mentioned previously, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, upon whose good favor the government of Justin Trudeau depends, as you know. So what's happened is that this has been going on for 15 years. I've been railing about it to absolutely no effect. And it started most significantly, of course, with the display at Vaisakhi parades and on a prominent, large, important Gurdwara in British Columbia of big martyr posters, life-size posters showing the Air India bomber Talvinder Parmar as a great martyr and hero of the Sikh nation. And I've often asked the question, what would happen if politicians said for once, Canadian politicians said for once, look, if you're going to have me stand under pictures at your Vaisakhi parade of Canada's worst ever mass murderer, I'm not coming. Imagine the effect that would have. That would force them to think twice about what they're doing. Because if they want to exercise political power, they have to be on friendly terms with those who hold that power. And so the failure of all parties in the Canadian system to make that short speech, say, sorry, I saw your Vaisakhi parade last year. You've got pictures of all of these martyrs holding them up, all these terrorists and assassins holding AK-47s and bombs. You want me to take part in that? No, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. They could have said that, and they didn't. Once again, yes, they did it. And what happens then as a result is that the Khalistanis see that they have more space to operate. And so instead of just a picture, now they have the chance as well as the picture. And by the way, among the pictures on display in Toronto yesterday were pictures of Prime Minister Modi, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, with the legend killers wanted. These are the killers of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in June 18th of last year. Now, having said all of that, I just allow me to make one other point. India has a problem making a fuss about this. Please. India has a serious problem making a fuss about all of this right now, when the Washington Post is running a detailed examination of the alleged assassination plot being run by Indian officials to carry out extrajudicial executions, assassinations on Canadian and American soil. If this is true, India has shot itself in the foot spectacularly. It's deprived itself of any moral standing to go and say to the Canadians or the Americans that you should crack down on the Khalistanis, when apparently, according to the indictment, which is extremely detailed, and I've yet to see it's been denied but not refuted. I mean, it hasn't been disproved by the Indian government. That indictment puts India in a very bad spot to give any lectures at all to the Canadians or the Americans. And I think that case is going to unravel. It's going to unravel. It's going to produce names of the agents from the research and analysis wing that were allegedly involved.
No, that's also something.
And people are going to quickly forget about yesterday's events. Go ahead.
All right, Mr. Terry, in fact, for the points that you have raised at this point, I do want to go to the other panelists. But Ashok Sajjanhar, do you want to quickly respond to what Terry has spoken at the end of it? He's spoken about the Washington Post report. Of course, the Indian government in the past as well has very categorically denied and refuted all these allegations. It has said that India has no such role. It has asked for credible evidence. None of that has been shown. How would you, as a former ambassador who has very strong connects with the government even now, how would you respond to this?
You know, Sneha, what Terry Milewski is saying that is, you know, he's trying to equate the Canadian case with the American case. The two are entirely different. So please have a look at it that way. You know, what the Canadians have said.
Same people.
No,
Mr. Terry, Mr. Terry, we allowed you. No, Mr. Terry, allow me a few minutes.
I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking.
Yes.
Cases are
Mr. Terry, allow Ashok Sajjanhar to speak. We gave you a patient hearing. We will return back. There are also two other panelists. So allow Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar to speak, and I will get back to just the way we gave you a very patient and detailed hearing, sir. Please, Ashok Sajjanhar.
I'll be very brief. You know, these cases are entirely different. As far as Canada is concerned, as I mentioned, and as the Indian representatives, Indian External Affairs Minister has mentioned, there is no there is no relevant information that has been shared with us by Canada, period. As far as the American case is concerned, they have given us some information. We have set up a senior committee. So we are treating it in a very responsible manner. There is no equivalence between the two cases. So forget about it. And we have said that there was possibly a rogue element involved in the RANW, and India itself is conscious and conscientious about its security. So it's taking all measures. The last point I want to make here is India is not in the business of having extra territorial killings of people who are opposed to us. We are not in that business. You know, stop talking about it and stop speculating what happens if they're involved. Let us see what comes out of it. Nothing has come out of it as yet. Sneha.
All right. Let me just go across to the other two panelists as well at this point. And if I could go across to Surinder Singh Lali, who's the national spokesperson for Global Punjabi Association. Thank you very much for coming on board, Mr. Lali. Just one thing that I want to ask you before I go further with other questions. As Prime Minister Trudeau addressed that huge gathering, which is also a yearly ritual, it's a very, very important day for Sikhs. The Foundation Day, it's the Khalsa Day. He made some very interesting statements, and he went on to say about how Sikhs are very integral to Canada, about how he will do everything that is required to protect their rights, to ensure that they are given the best of even the infrastructure development for Gurdwaras and everything. That was also mentioned very clearly. We will always be there to protect for your rights and freedoms. We will always defend your community against hatred. While he said these things, and there is no doubt that Sikhs are integral aspect, integral part of not just Canada, of India as well. The issue is not Sikhs. The issue is Khalistanis, or the Pro-Khalistani movement, which is a terror organization in India. So the two are really different. India does not have a problem with Justin Trudeau batting for the Sikhs. India does not have a problem when he says that we will ensure that their rights are protected at all costs. India has a problem, and I'm sure Sikhs also would have a problem. You could give us a better understanding of this. When when pro-Khalistani or Khalistani zindabad slogans are raised before him, and several such threats are given out in the past against India or India-led missions. How would you look at this, sir?
Thank you, Sneha, and it's a pleasure and honor for me to be here. And if I want to take it from the top, you said, what is the issue? The issue is vote bank, narrow vote bank politics, political funding, and trying to salvage his dwindling political career, especially with Jagmeet Singh and him being in bed together. Before I start, as a proud Indian Sikh and on behalf of most Sikhs that I know I've ever met in my lifetime, I protest in the strongest language available with this K narrative. And I wouldn't even go beyond the word K because it is absolutely nonsensical. Sometimes it appalls me or either, amuses me that who are they holding a brief for? I mean, it's a minor rogue fringe which the Canadian government or the establishment, under the bogey of free speech, nourishes them for their political and their vested interest. We are over 200 million living in India. We have nothing to do with it. I'm sorry. We are very capable of defending our interests if we have any issues in the country we live in, and we can have them addressed within the parentheses of the law available to us. That's one. I'm just going to make two more points. I feel Canada's heading the Pakistan way. I mean, Justin Trudeau has been a little bully boy for the entire world. The way the Chinese premier sort of reprimanded him as if he was some, kindergarten school kid, and then the way Saudi Arabia totally snapped ties with them. So I feel that the Canadians, the country of Canada, may want to learn from my little wisdom available from me. They're heading the Pakistan way because of these snakes that they're bringing into their backyard. It's going to be a tough time for them. Now I'm just going to highlight three parts of his speech. He talks about Sikh values. What Sikh values is he talking about? I mean, the Sikh gurus sacrifice their own children for their motherland and, for the sake of religion. And he is talking about India. So I don't think he understands what Sikh values are. It is only the values of vote and political funding is best he understands. And number two is that I have been in Canada many times, and I see a lot of people, even in Canada, don't subscribe. There are over 800,000, Canadian Sikhs. A lot of them don't subscribe. Some of them who do stick around them for financial gains or for getting their political asylum. So again, it's a very small fringe that is, attached to them. And my last point is that he spoke about enhancing security at the places of worship. As an Indian Sikh, I wish to know what has he done about the attacks that happened, the vandalism that happened in the Hindu temples in Canada. So I feel that this is, I feel bad for the way, Justin Trudeau is taking Canada down the, south, and there will be a lot of, damage that will have to be undone for it to be, for it to come back. But from what I just heard from Terry, if the next leader who he thinks could, in opposition, who could be the next prime minister, also sharing the stage and not holding a protest, I think Canada has a lot of problems at its hand.
Okay, before I go back to Terry, let me just go across to Dean Bagdale at this point. Dean, help us to understand. Free speech is hugely important for global powers, including India. But when you talk about free speech in Canada, how much of the Khalistani movement, threats by a terror organization, sloganeering by a terror organization would engulf free speech?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on today's panel. I've read Terry's book, and he's done some outstanding work on having Canadians and people around the world to better understand the Khalistani separatist movement. I think in terms of free speech, we're obviously heading into dangerous territory. We can see how this scenario potentially elevates into the same situation we're dealing with Hamas and Israel, anti-Semitism on one side, and a pro-Palestinian movement wrapped up in a terror organization. We have a similar thing with the Khalistani separatists, but during the last 40 years, the Indian government has not gone through the court process to actually engage to have anybody extradited for acts of terrorism or sedition, as we might say. But we are, and in Canada, we have free speech and we allow people to express their views. I think if we express hatred towards India, I think if we express views that talk about murdering individuals, this kind of speech should be stamped out and not allowed all in our country or any country for that matter. This is a complex issue. I could get onto a number of different points with respect to the Nijjar murder.
Absolutely. So just allow me this before I just go across to Ted. One more thing, Mr. Dean. As Canadians, as people who may not be directly in politics, but maybe most political watchers, how would they look at this issue? Does this echo with them? Do they want to know about this? Is this a talk point for ordinary people, for voters? I think we seem to have some issue. Let me just go across to Telly Milewski at this point. Mr. You were making an important point. Help me understand again at this point. You mentioned that the fact that the Prime Minister was there and he did not say what he should have possibly, but there was also an opposition leader who was present who possibly could be the next Prime Minister. Could you help us understand for an audience that may not be very closely involved in Canadian politics, the broader picture of why is it such a strong rallying point in Canada across party lines?
Well, first, the most important thing is that the electoral districts upon which many Canadian, perhaps most Canadian federal elections turn are a few swing ridings, as we call them, meaning that they are precariously held by one party. Maybe the other party is going to win them at the next election. In both Brampton, in Ontario, and Surrey in British Columbia, there are probably 5 or 6 seats, a couple more outside those areas where there's a high Sikh population. By the way, slight slip up in the script earlier, if I may, there's not 70,000 Sikhs in Canada. We're talking about 700,000. So we're getting on for 750,000 Sikhs in Canada. And of that, some minority, you can call it small, you can call it tiny, it hasn't been properly measured, it varies, support the Khalistan viewpoint that there should be an independent state. Now, having said all that, the reason that all the politicians are scared of saying anything bad about the chants and the martyr posters and the insults hurled at India at rallies such as yesterday's and at the annual Vaishakhi parades is because everybody does it. I can't criticize him for doing it because I do the same thing. I'm playing football with the terrorist wing of the Khalistan movement. He's doing it, I'm doing it, and so is he. We're all doing it. So I can't criticize anyone, and it's dangerous to do so because that means they're going to win that seat, and those 5 seats flip the other way. I'm out of power. It's not much more complicated than that, I'm afraid. As for, if I can make one other point, as for the idea that somehow the allegations made by Mr. Trudeau against India of an assassination plot are completely separate and different from the allegations made about the same people for the same problem by the United States, I'm afraid you're living under an illusion if you say that. We're talking about the same plot against the same people. And if you don't believe me about that, believe the people who were involved in the plot, because Nick Gupta, as soon as Nijjar was killed in Canada, spoke to the author of the plot in India, who was telling him about the murder of Nijjar. I mean, the same people are involved in the same plot. It covered not just Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, the leader of Sikh Justice, but also Hardeep Singh Nijjar and 2 or 3 others perhaps in Canada, whose names we don't know. But this was one plot, 2 countries at least, and perhaps some others. And there's no question about that. And you can say until you're blue in the face that Canada has given no evidence to India, maybe so. But the United States has, and it's the same plot by the same people. Sorry about that.
All right. Ashok Sajjanhar, do you want to respond to that? And it's an important part of what he's mentioning. One, about how Canada has not been able to give any credible evidence repeatedly. But there has been an investigation that has been ordered for by India with respect to the limited information that the United States has shared. When you say the two are different, what do you mean by that, particularly with respect to India? And also, second aspect of this, how do you see the bilateral relations affected, particularly with what's been happening over a period of time, including the most recent?
Okay, 2 points and very important points. Let me come to the second one first, Sneha, if you permit me. You know, as you mentioned
No, why don't you go with the first one first, sir? We'll go to the bilateral ties later, but why don't you go with the other aspect first of what Terry said, because I think it's important to get that response as well first.
I'll go as you suggest. So, you know, why I say this, if there was a similarity in cases, there would have been at least some evidence. Surely the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, whatever it is, you know, they are not so inefficient or incompetent that after more than 10 months, they have not been able to identify anyone. You know, they said that there was, I don't know how many, 4 or 5 people got out of an SUV and shot Hardeep Singh Nijjar. They have not been able to, they have video recording of that. They have not been able to arrest anyone. They have not been able to file any charge sheet whatsoever. Do you expect me to believe what Mr. Trudeau says or what Mr. Terry Milewski says that, you know, trust me, that they are the same people? How? You have not told me anything about whether they are the same people or not. On the other hand, when the Americans came to me, they came to me with dossiers, they came to me with evidence, they came to me with information, they came to me with facts, they came to me with evidence. I have gone on the basis of that. I have set up a senior committee in place, and I have conducted an investigation because this whole issue is equally important as far as my own security is concerned. It is not only, you know, the security in Canada, you know, some of these terrorists who are moving around here and there. It is not concerned. It is my own security, and that is why I have to go into great depth and great detail. And there has been some information, some investigation that has been found. I'm not privy to the result of that, but I will not accept and I will not believe what Mr. Terry Milewski is saying, that both of them are the same. I have no evidence on that. And if you permit, now let me go to the second question also. As you said yourself, the relations between India and Canada have nosedived as a result of, you know, what Justin Trudeau said in the Parliament on the 18th of September. If you see, as far as relations between India and the United States, they continue to soar, they continue to grow. Even after that, there have been statements by Mr. Joe Biden and his, you know, the White House senior official Kurt Campbell, who have said that the United States relations with India are the most consequential and the most significant relations of the United States for this century. So our relations are unaffected by whatever these issues are. These might be sort of, you know, small hiccups. because there has been, some element of trust and confidence between the two sides. And we have shared information with each other. With Canada, there has been none. There has just been allegations. And over the last 9 months, whatever we have asked, we have not got any response, any plausible response from Canada at all. Sneha.
All right. Okay. Dean Baxendale, I believe you're back with us. I just was trying to understand, with what's unfolding in Canada, with the vote bank politics often can be very concentrated in certain politics, as even in certain pockets, as even Terry was explaining to the areas of influence, the regions of influence. But is this issue something, when you look at the larger Indian population in India, students who are Indian students who are in Canada, the Indians who are living in Canada or who become eventually citizens of Canada, and larger diaspora, as well as those who may not be Indians but ordinary citizens, is this issue a talk point? Does this become a rallying point for people? Do they ask questions about it? Do they talk about it? How does it echo with the ordinary people?
Well, as you may be aware, or maybe Indian viewers are not unaware, we are currently holding a commission or a national inquiry into election interference by governments. Specifically, the allegations revolved around the Chinese Communist Party's involvement directly in the 2019 and 21 Canadian elections. So the idea of diaspora influence has entered into the mainstream in terms of consciousness. Whether or not it's of significant interest when people go to polls, that's another issue. But what we have in Canada, United States, and other countries is our governments, including the Indian government, who are absolutely trying to influence diaspora communities and certainly influence politicians from those communities who may get elected to ensure that they certainly support policies that may, bring countries closer together on trade, culture, and other opportunities. In my case, and I think in Canada, our investment in India should be significant because India potentially is the counter to the Chinese Communist Party. But yes, I think this is an issue that is becoming more aware to Canadians. My publishing, Anti-Optimum Publishing, is actually the organization that started to bring forward the 2019
Dean, very quickly, and I know I'm asking you this question because I don't have the time to go back to Terry on this. I have to go to Surinder Singh Lali for the last response. But if you could spend 30, 40 seconds on this particular issue, it's going to be very interesting to see. Do you think after the Indian elections and the Canadian elections, things might return to a sense of normalcy, or is that period too long?
I think we have to start to repair that relationship now. And I do hope at the highest levels that those conversations are taking place. The relationship between India and Canada is significant, and we must partner together, work together as like-minded democracies to support each other. So I think that yes, I hope those discussions are going on, and I hope the ambassador engages with Canadian officials to ensure that we can have a successful relationship moving forward.
Right. Surinder Singh Lali, my last question to you, and as many of you may be voting in Canada in months to come, how is the Sikh community looking at all this?
Who are you asking the question
before I get to that, allow me to add another point of view for the very kind consideration. Maybe it's Canada is being a little, proxy boy for the United States, because end of the day, it's the Five Eyes who've actually ended up snooping on each other than to be snooping on dictatorships. And maybe this is a pressure tactic by the United States to sort of deal with India for the very independent foreign policy we've had. And especially, we've chosen not to become an American ally. And things panned out in the Ukraine war, that we wanted to serve our interests first and simply not toe the line that America and its allies blindly tend to follow. So I don't know. I don't know. Because, if Pannu on American soil talks about Air India and actually blowing up the aircraft.
Fair enough. That's
Air
quite
India is part of
speculative.
Star
We're totally
Alliance.
out of time. Do you want to respond to that last question, sir?
You asking me, what was the question? Which one?
Yes. Do you want to respond to the last question to you? Just for the lack of time, about how do the communities look at this entire issue in Canada largely?
You could take my word for it. The majority of them are not with these fringe rogue elements.
All right. Terry, before we just end the show, one question to you, Terry.
Thank you.
And I know you made a reference to this in passing, but between generations, not much seemed to have changed, whether it be with the father and the son.
No, it's unfortunate that because of the indulgence
why I'm asking you this question is to be able to drive the point of this is not the first time that bilateral relations has soured in the way they have, because, I mean, it's not necessary the audience may be well aware of what had happened in the past. So just to draw that parallel before we close the show.
Yes, I mean, there's a very sad history. I mean, you go back 40 years, and Pierre Trudeau is sitting with Indira Gandhi, who is sitting with him. Look, you've got these terrorists from India in your country. What are you going to do about it? They're threatening India's territorial integrity. And Trudeau, in his characteristic style, shrugged. And no action was taken about it. And here we are still in the same position. All I can say in closing is that this is most unfortunate, and it could be turned back if Canadian politicians had the guts to stand up to this sort of blackmail where, we're going to chant right in front of you, Khalistani zindabad, right in front of the Prime Minister on TV, and we're going to get away with it. What's next? Now we're going to have an effigy of Balvinder Singh Parmar, the Air India bomber, being crowned King of Canada. I mean, it's got to stop somewhere, and it won't stop until the politicians show some spine to make it stop. As for the other issues that we've canvassed here, I'm warning you. I'm saying with all the strength at command that India has got to take very seriously allegations made by Justin Trudeau, whether they like it or not, because, yes, it's the same plot by the same people as are alleged. You can't get away with saying the FBI allegations, we're taking those seriously, but we don't have anything from Canada. It's the same story, guys. It's the same.
Okay. All right. I think Ashok Sajjanhar also, because to give a different perspective on it, had given a detailed response to it. The issue primarily remains that India is still awaiting for any credible evidence from Canada, unlike what US did share with India and the response that India has taken. Thank you very much, all four of you, for bringing in some very important perspectives from your area of expertise and for helping us understand this issue much deeply. Terry Milski, Ashok Sajjanhar, Surinder Singh Lali, as well as Dean Baxendale, thank you very much for joining us. It's time for a very short break.